Let's move on to the Chicago Bears. You mentioned them earlier. This is a team that I wouldn't say exceeded expectations last year, but Matt Nagy in year one was a revelation in some ways offensively and really carried a lot and even expanded on what he did in Kansas City as a play caller and an offensive game planner to now as the head coach of the Bears.
I would say they definitely exceeded expectations. 12 wins for the first time since 2006. Even the quarterback in Mitchell Trubisky, who was improved, but he wasn't like vastly improved. Not like he wasn't making like a Carson Wentz level leap. And so my question though is about the running game, because Mitchell Trubisky, we know, has a lot of limitations, still a lot of questions. It's still going to be a run-oriented, not that they didn't pass, but a run-oriented offense. And can David Montgomery be the immediate leader of this backfield? And 3 days before the draft, I can't remember if it was Ryan Pace or it was Matt Nagy, said running back was not a pressing need, quote unquote, for the Bears. And then a team that had only 5 draft picks 3 days later traded up for a running back.
And that's notable. It wasn't just like, okay, we're waiting at our spot and taking best player available. It's he's so much higher on our board than anyone else that we are prioritizing a running back that we like.
So they did that, and since then, Matt Nagy multiple times has compared him to Kareem Hunt. So he's not trying to like tamp down expectations. And with all due respect to the Mike Davis hype train that was before the draft, I think it's probably a DOA for the 2019 season.
But like no matter what, if we talk about being better than someone, I think it's safe to say that
he's an improvement on Jordan Howard.
David Montgomery, yes, and Mike Davis are
your
an
least
improvement
favorite player
over Jordan Howard. But with that said, like Tariq Cohen is still going to have his role because neither of those players touch Tariq Cohen's role at all.
Yeah, Tariq Cohen, the actually good Theo Riddick,
yes.
The poor man's Darren Sproles.
To me, he basically plays another position, though, because he's 180 pounds. He's not going to get goal line carries. He's not
exactly. So if Dave Montgomery is the feature back, Pat, does that propel him into top 10 scoring status at running back at the position?
I think maybe top 18 would be slightly more realistic. Mid-range to low-end RB2 is probably what you're hoping for. Because like the Tariq Cohen role is locked in. That's not going anywhere.
You mentioned it earlier. This team wants to be like the Jaguars from the 2017. They want to win with defenses running. So if Montgomery wins this theoretical lead back alpha dog status, he can definitely flirt with RB1 numbers, I think.
And quickly to tie this up, Mitchell Trubisky is someone who is a lot like Josh Allen in that if it's outside of structure, he's not necessarily going to win with his arm, he's going to win with his feet. But that's something that, we've seen success with quarterbacks that can do that much more now than they have been in the past. Nick Minzio, the Minnesota Vikings, a team that paid Kirk Cousins a lot of money heading into 2018, and it did not pay off because of a horrific offensive line for multiple reasons. What about in 2019?
Horrific offensive line and very ill-timed turnovers from Cousins that turned into touchdowns for the defense. So, I mean, they fired John T. Filippo towards the end of last season, hired Kevin Stefanski full-time, brought in Gary Kubiak. My question is going to be, is Coach Mike Zimmer going to put his stamp on this offense and make this offense run the ball? Is it going to affect Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs' numbers?
Because we heard hints of this last year, right? Like, didn't he basically fire someone or demote someone just because, hey, I want you to run the football more, even if you have 2 of the top 15 wide receivers in the NFL?
He did. And like I said, they promoted Kevin Stefanski, immediately removed his interim tag. I'm not super concerned for Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. I think they'll both, maybe they won't be, for a while last year, they're both top 12. I think maybe more top 18, top 20 might be slightly more realistic. But even if they're a run-committed team, which every sign says they're going to be, it's a narrow enough offense, not like no number 3 receiver to speak of. There's some target competition.
Sunshine Taylor?
Yeah, a little target competition at tight end, but it's a narrow enough offense where even if they go all in on the run, I think you're still going to get very solid, at the least, wide receiver 2 production.
Agree with everything you said there.
And you mentioned Stefanski, but it's really Gary Kubiak, is it not? Like, I mean, I'm a crazy person and go and watch all these post-draft press conferences, and it was about 5-1 of Gary Kubiak mentions from Mike Zimmer versus Kevin Stefanski.
That's interesting.
And
very interesting, actually.
And in fact, Gary Kubiak was the reason, one of the main reasons why they drafted the center in the first round is because when Gary Kubiak was off last fall, he was evaluating all these college prospects. It was like, I want the center to run my zone system. So, like, I know that the titles are different and they're probably going to mention Stefanski so much, but the zone running scheme that we have seen historically been very good for Gary Kubiak. Maybe he's the run game coordinator and Stefanski's pass game, who knows what happens, but I agree with you. Like, Stephon Diggs, fantastic. Adam Thielen, fantastic. I just hope we get an ideal situation for them to perform in.
Can we just say, I hope we all have a fall as good this fall as finding our center of the future.
Yeah.
That's a good fall.
Jesse Pantusco, the Green Bay Packers, a team that is consistent, doesn't make a lot of waves, doesn't make a lot of changes. They've made some drastic changes heading into 2019, namely with a new head coach in Matt LaFleur.
Yeah, absolutely. The Mike McCarthy era is finally over, and but Matt LaFleur comes with some question marks too. He's from the Sean McVay coaching tree, which led him to get his offensive coordinator job in Tennessee last year. But I think jury's still out on how well that went. They didn't make the playoffs and really, waited till the end of the season to give Derrick Henry the workload he deserved. And we know that Aaron Rodgers is kind of a tough guy to please. He butted heads with McCarthy, and already there have been some rumblings that he has to maybe win over Rodgers.
Yep.
So I think that's going to be an interesting situation to watch. First-time head coach with a quarterback who, I believe they talked about limiting some of the audibles at the line of scrimmage, and Rodgers is not going to be okay. Rodgers is, no, this is my line of scrimmage. I call the plays, and that could be a tug of war throughout the year.
I'm still wondering why Matt LaFleur got hired, because it's not based on what we saw with Tennessee.
No.
You have no identity until the end of the season. Like if you could have been doing this all season, you would have made the playoffs. Like the decision making is obviously in question.
And I'm not saying that he's going to be a bad head coach no matter what. It's just based on things that we haven't seen put out in practice yet, right? It's probably about the meetings and the conversations during the hiring process. To your point, Jesse, like if Aaron Rodgers is the best in the NFL at surveying what the defense is doing, making changes at the line of scrimmage,
why would you limit him?
So why would you limit him? And it certainly sounds like they want him to stick to a script much more often.
They do. And Matt LaFleur, last year, very mixed results in Tennessee. He does check all the boxes. He's not only a Sean McVay protege, he's also a Kyle Shanahan protege. Ooh. And he's had kind of a bit of a bromance with Aaron Rodgers a little bit, even despite they've been trying to put on a unified front this offseason. And with Aaron Rodgers, it honestly could just be any new coach even if it was like a terrible new coach, like any change of leadership there would hopefully spark Aaron Rodgers to a degree. And that's kind of also like a common offseason new coach trope, always related to audibling. Either we're going to audible more or we're going to audible less. I kind of don't put any stock in that really with Aaron Rodgers. I don't really think that's going to be a real concern. So I just think basically any coach hopefully will be an improvement for Aaron Rodgers.
I will move on to the Detroit Lions. The big question here, because we know where Bob Quinn, the GM, comes from, New England. We know where Matt Patricia, the head coach, comes from, New England. Is it even possible to mirror what the Patriots do offensively with Matthew Stafford as your quarterback versus Tom Brady? Because if you put them up on a board, right, they are very different quarterbacks. Tom Brady is consistent. Tom Brady is precise. Matthew Stafford is high variance. He has a big arm and wants to test it and spray the ball down the field. But as we've seen, they want to turn Matthew Stafford into this quarterback that, once in a while has to make a big-time throw, and other than that, run the ball a lot, because that's really what the Patriots offense has turned into as well.
I say that's frustrating Matthew Stafford, actually, because a player who had kind of always lacked run identity as a quarterback had actually become kind of quietly a high-efficient passer under Jim Bob Cooter. And then last year, out of nowhere, I guess you could say out of nowhere, kind of abandoned everything. Stafford, like this painstaking growth process he had to become like a more efficient, less cavalier quarterback. They kind of just scrapped that, and now we're all in on this new model and basically treating him like a
So
true
is it even
caretaker.
winnable?
You hate seeing guys with arm talent like that.
Yeah.
Put the waist like the way they're doing this.
Matthew Stafford is a guy who I understand the inclination to rein him in to a degree, but to turn him into like a handoff specialist basically is not it's not going to be a winning thing.
And it's also a team that heading into the 2018 offseason, they hadn't re-signed Eric Ebron, but they could have, right? They could have kept his fifth-year option or something. They could have kept him on the roster. Yeah. Then they had Golden Tate, they had Marvin Jones, they had Kenny Galladay. Now it's Kenny Galladay and Marvin Jones, I believe that's already rumblings that he might not be on the roster this season. This is an offense that is being neutered. And I don't want that in 2019 as an offense for an NFL team.
No. I will say at least C.J. Anderson is an improvement on LeGarrette Blount, so maybe that'll help a little bit. Not I'm saying he's a massive improvement, but he is better than LeGarrette. I mean,
As a big short
It's going to
yardage
be real
guy.
frustrating.
yeah,
when
no
Sanders
disrespect to
is getting
C.J.
the ball.
Anderson, best player in the playoffs last year, but yeah, this is not going to be a fun offense
But
to
it,
watch.
and it does kind of add up to Kerryon Johnson possibly being a breakout player. And I'm fully investing in
Detroit
Kerryon
Free
Johnson.
Press has predicted 60-plus receptions for Kerryon Johnson. So I was going to say, hopefully Theo Riddick gets cut. I don't hope any player loses their job, but hopefully he gets cut and finds a new job with another team, because I don't want Theo Riddick, who has not been good for several years, kind of capping Kerryon Johnson's 3-down upside.
I actually nominated Kerryon Johnson for the breakout player, speaking on a previous podcast. And speaking of the podcast, go and subscribe to the podcast right now. Get caught up on all the latest NFL news while on the go with the Rotoworld Football Podcast twice a week during the summer. It's actually 4 times during the NFL season. You ready?
Ready.
Not yet.
It's going to be a lot of stuff. So check it out over at rotoworld.com/podcast/NFL or wherever podcasts are found.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.